Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. I'm Hasham Ali Khan. Last video I have completed the topic of hire purchase, and in this video I'm going to start the next topic called leasing. So these two are the methods of financing. The business can purchase the asset or take the asset on hire purchase system, or can take the asset on leasing method. So what are the differences between hire purchase and leasing? In the next video I'm going to explain, but right now in this video I'm going to explain the meaning of the term lease and what are the contents of lease agreement and what are the advantages of this leasing. These three things I'm going to explain, so watch the video till the end. So if you have not watched the earlier videos, I suggest you go to the playlist of my channel. Select the subject financial institutions and markets. Watch the initial videos. Be perfect regarding financial institutions, commercial banks, structure of financial system in India, and last video hire purchase. Now before starting the topic leasing, take the screenshot of the points which I've written on the board. Then I'll explain all the points in detail. Come on. First of all, the meaning of the term lease. Actually, leasing is an arrangement that provides a business with the opportunity of using the asset as per their requirement without acquiring the title or ownership. So this leasing is an arrangement in which an organization, a business organization, can be able to use the asset according to the requirement and without owning, without acquiring the title. Without acquiring the title, a business can be able to use the asset as according to their own requirement. The lease is a written agreement between the owner of the asset and the organization planning to use the asset, wherein the owner allows the assets for a specified period of time. Example, I am the owner of the asset. So I have given the asset to you. You are having a business, you are having an organization, you require an asset. So I am the owner, I am giving you the asset for a specified period of time. So during the specified period of time, you can use the asset, you can take the benefit from the asset, but you are not the owner of the asset. The owner of the asset is some other person. Then why this owner has given to you in return for a fixed amount? That amount will be paid by the person who uses the asset, right? So both the parties sign the contract. See here, this leasing is a legal contract. It's an agreement that should be signed by both the parties. That means owner of the asset and the person who uses the asset, both should sign the agreement and commit themselves to fulfill certain conditions, wherein one party gets the right to use the asset and the other party receives consideration periodically for allowing the use of asset. So there is an agreement, written agreement between the two parties, and all the terms and conditions are written in that agreement, in that deed. So the deed specifies that the owner has conveyed the property to the other person for use for a specified period of time in return for a consideration which is paid by the user of the asset to the owner of the asset. Now, the owner of the asset allowing its use is called the lessor. Here we use the technical terms lessor and lessee. Lessor is the owner of the asset. He has given the asset to another party for use. The other party who is using the asset is called lessee. And the amount paid by the lessee to the lessor is called lease rent. So these three terms, owner of the asset, lessor, the user of the asset is the lessee, and the amount paid by the lessee to the lessor is called lease rental. That's it. Now, as per AS 19, Accounting Standard 19, which is issued by Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, ICAI. They have given the definition of the term lease. So what is the definition? It's an agreement whereby the lessor conveys to the lessee. Conveys means given. It's an agreement where the lessor has conveyed the asset to the lessee in return for a payment or series of payments. That means why the lessor has conveyed the property to the lessee, so that the lessee should pay the payment or a series of payment, the right to use the asset for an agreed period of time. Why this amount is charged? The lessor has given the right to use the asset for a period of time. So you can see all the contents of this lease is given by this definition. So again I repeat, it's an agreement. First of all, a lease is a written agreement between two parties. Lessor is the owner, lessee is the user, the person who used the asset is lessee. And whereby the lessor conveys to the lessee. The lessor is giving the property to the lessee in return for a payment or a series of payments. In return for a payment or a series of payment, lessor has given the property to the lessee the right to use the asset for an agreed period of time. That is the definition given by AS 19 of ICAI. The owner permits the user to economically use the asset on a payment of periodical amount. So why this owner is giving the right to use the asset in return for a periodical payment made by the lessee to the lessor? Then the title of the goods remain with the owner, lessor of the asset. Remember always, the owner of the asset, the lessor, is having the right of ownership. Ownership will not be transferred. Simply the right to use is given by the lessor to the lessee. At the end of the lease contract, the asset is returned to the lessor, or an option is given to the lessee either to purchase the asset or renew the lease agreement. So what the terms and conditions of the lease is that after the specified period of time, the lessee has to return the asset back to the lessor, or the lessee can purchase the asset, or the lessee can renew the lease agreement. So different cases are there how the lease can be concluded. Now leasing is becoming a preferred solution to resolve the fixed asset required versus purchasing the asset. So most of the businesses will be confronted with the problem whether to purchase the asset or whether to take the asset on lease. That means the business has to evaluate what are the benefits and disadvantages of purchasing and what are the benefits and disadvantages of leasing. By comparing this, the business can be able to take the decision whether leasing is beneficial or not. Now, while evaluating this investment decision, actually leasing is an investment decision. Investment means the business has to purchase an asset. So in case of outright purchase, the business has to part away the cash. The business has to make the payment, the whole payment. Whereas in case of lease agreement, the business is not investing the money in the asset, but using the asset. Some other person is owning the asset and given the asset to them. They are only using the asset. So it's an essential for the owner of the capital to understand whether leasing would yield better return on capital or not. So the lessor will evaluate that when I am making the investment in purchasing the asset and giving that on lease, am I getting suitable return or not? If the lessor says that whatever return I am getting, it is less return, so he will not purchase the asset and give it to the lessee. So every lessor as well as lessee both have to evaluate the decision to enter into lease agreement. Now it can be beneficial to both the parties for availing tax benefit or tax planning. Particularly, this leasing will directly affect the tax planning. I'll explain you in advantages and disadvantages regarding how the tax planning will be affected by this decision of leasing. But remember one case, that both the parties can get the benefit of tax planning. It will be helpful for leasing, right? So this is the brief discussion about the meaning of the term lease. Now, what are the lease contents? That means what are the terms and clause to be written in the lease agreement or lease deed? The contents of lease agreement. The lease agreement is a written agreement. First of all, I told you already that it's an agreement in writing. It's a legal agreement. Because once the lessee and lessor have signed the agreement, they are legally bound by the provisions, by the clauses given in the deed. So carefully, the lessor and lessee should read all the clauses of the agreement and then enter into contract. So it is known as lease deed, which states the legal relationship between the owner of the asset, lessor, and the user of the asset, lessee. So this lease deed will contains all the terms and conditions in which the owner of the asset, lessor, has conveyed the asset to the user, that is lessee. Then under the leasing agreement, the company acquires the right to use the asset without holding the title to it. So in this lease agreement, it should be given that the user has the right to use the asset for a period of time in return for a consideration paid by the lessee to the lessor. Now, what are the contents of lease agreement are? Normally, actually we cannot specify these are the only contents in every lease agreement. It will change from contract to contract. But normally, what are the contents, what are the clauses to be included in lease deed? First one, description of the cost of equipment. First of all, the lease agreement should specify what is the nature and what is the cost of the equipment leased. Secondly, commencement date for the lease contract. When the lease is going to start and when the lease agreement is coming to an end, the dates should be specified. Thirdly, amount of lease rental. Every lease agreement should specify how much is the lease rental to be paid by the lessee to the lessor. Fourth one, mode of payment. How the payment should be made. Either it should be made through check or cash or any other mode. What is the mode of payment through which lease rental will be paid by the lessee to the lessor? Fixed periods of lease renewal options. That means the rental deed should contain the clause regarding at the end of the lease period what should be done by the lessee. Lessee should return the asset, or lessee can retain the asset, purchase the asset by paying the price to the lessor, or the lessee can renew the lease agreement. This should be specified. Next one is guarantee for payment of lease rental by lessee. Normally what will happen, the lessor asks the lessee to give the guarantee that if the lessee does not pay the lease rent, who else is the person who is giving the guarantee for making the payment? Because the lessor wants assurance that he must get the lease rental on time. Next one is variations of lease rentals. Normally lease rentals will be fixed, but according to the convenience of both the parties, they can make variations in the lease rentals. That means in the beginning the lease rental may be less, after a period of time the lease rental may be more. That sort of conditions can be specified in the deed. Last one, termination of lease agreement in the event of certain events. If something happens, then under what conditions the lease agreement can be cancelled, terminated. So what are the circumstances in which the lease agreement can be cancelled or terminated? So these are the few contents of the lease agreement or lease deed. In examination, you may get a question explain the lease agreement and what are the contents of lease agreement. So just now I have explained all the contents. Now, very important topic, advantages of leasing. Very frequently in examination, they will ask you the question, what are the advantages and disadvantages of leasing? Advantages I am going to explain in this video. and disadvantages and types of leases I'll explain in the next video. First of all, what are the advantages? There are many advantages of leasing to the lessor as well as to the lessee. So first of all, alternative source of finance. See here, every business will not have unlimited capital. Most of the businesses will face the capital crunch problem. That means shortage of capital. We don't have abundant capital. Limited capital we have. But we want to purchase the asset without investment. So this leasing agreement is the best option where without making the investment, we can be able to use the asset. For example, I'm having a business. I need a car for my business. For running my business smoothly, I need a vehicle, but I don't have the funds. I don't have the funds. So the alternative is I can take the motor vehicle on lease. Without making the investment, I can have the asset. That is the 100% financing scheme. The business is financed by leasing. That is the first advantage. It provides 100% finance. Second, flexibility. The lease agreement depends on the terms and conditions which are mutually agreed between the lessor and the lessee. For example, I am the lessor and you are the lessee. So at the time of signing the agreement, the lessee says that in the initial first 3-4 years, I cannot be able to pay full amount of lease rental because I have to set up the business. It will take some time to grow the business. That's why the lease rental will be low in the beginning. Later on, after 5 years, the lease agreement should increase. So lessor will say, okay. So in this way, the flexible conditions are made in the lease agreement regarding the lease rental amount. So leasing provides a lot of flexibility at the time of duration of lease, and the amount of lease rental can be adjusted according to the requirement of the lessee. So how much period of lease and how much is the amount of lease rental, this can be mutually settled by the lessor and the lessee. Rentals are paid at cash originated from the use of the asset acquired on the lease. That means the lessee got the advantage that they will pay the lease rental from the income which the business will derive by using the asset. By using the asset, the income is increasing. From that income, the lessee can pay the lease rental. That is the advantage. Next one, better presentation of financial position. The financial position can be ascertained by preparing balance sheet or statement of financial position. So this balance sheet, the company's borrowing capacity remains unaffected on account of leasing, as lease rental obligations are not included under liabilities in the balance sheet. See here, when a business takes an asset on lease, the amount due, that means lease rental due, will not be shown as liability. That means whatever lease rentals are paid, that will be treated as an expenditure. So it will not be taken as a liability. When it is not taken as a liability, then borrowing capacity will remain same. When the business purchases the asset, taken the asset on lease, the borrowing capacity will not change because there is no change in the liabilities of the balance sheet. Now, the debt equity ratio of the lessee is not affected by leasing. Leasing enables the lessee company to generate additional profits and helps in improving EPS of the company, earning per share. EPS stands for earnings per share. So, by taking the asset on lease, the earning capacity of the business will increase. When the business increases its earnings per share will increase. The business can be able to get more profit by taking the asset on lease. Next one is stretching borrowing limits. Every business will have a limit of borrowing. A business cannot borrow unlimited way. Every business will have limit on their borrowing capacity. So by taking the assets on lease, the borrowing capacity will remain same. The borrowing capacity will not change. Next, better utilization of scarce resources. One of the scarce resources in a business are capital fund. This is very scarce. Now, by taking the asset on lease, the remaining cash can be used for day-to-day expenditure. The business can be able to effectively utilize the remaining capital because the capital is not invested in purchasing the asset. The business has taken the asset on lease. So the funds which are not used in purchasing can be used for any other purpose. Next one is tax benefits. Lease rentals are deductible from income of business. Income Tax Act 1961, it says that lease rental paid are the expenditure. So these lease rentals paid will be deducted in computing the income from business. So business income will be reduced. When business income is reduced, the tax liability will get reduced. So when a business takes the asset on lease, the tax liability will get reduced. Similarly, the lessor is entitled for depreciation on leased assets. The benefit, tax benefit, not only will be available to lessee, but also tax benefit is available to the lessor also. How? Lessor can be able to get the depreciation, can get the advantage of depreciation on the assets which are leased. So when they claim depreciation, the income will get reduced. When income gets reduced, the tax liability will get reduced. So tax benefit is accrued to the lessee as well as to the lessor. Next one is supports growth. Business will grow. How the business will grow when the assets are taken on lease? Leasing is of great advantage to companies that have restriction on growth. There are some restriction on growth. Example I have given here, small scale industries. The government has given a threshold that if the total assets of the business is so and so limit, then only they'll get the benefits, privileges from the government. Once the asset increases, they will not get any privilege or benefit from the government. So business will try that it should not have more assets. If more assets are there, they will not get the benefit or privilege from the government. That's why they want to restrict the growth. Then how to restrict the growth without having the assets? Lease is the method. By taking the assets on lease, the assets will not be the assets will not be more. When the assets are not more, they can be able to get the benefit from the government. For example, small scale industries are entitled to certain exemptions only if the total asset size is less than the prescribed statutory limit. Leased assets are not shown as assets in the balance sheet. When the business has taken the assets on lease, these assets are not shown in the balance sheet as assets, right? So that is the advantage. Next is cost effective. How it is cost effective? Because when a business wants to take the asset, purchase the asset by taking a loan or by issuing the shares, lot of expenditure is incurred to raise the capital and then purchase the asset. Unnecessary cost will be incurred in raising the capital. In the same way, when the asset is taken on lease, this cost can be eliminated. The cost of capital can be eliminated. That is also one of the benefits. Next is no risk of obsolescence. Obsolescence means outdated. Due to advancement in the technology, many assets are becoming outdated, but the ownership lies with the lessor. So it will not affect. Due to this obsolescence, it will not affect the lessee's position because the lessee has to return it to the lessor. The owner is the lessor. So no effect of obsolescence. Last one is protection against inflation. Inflation is the situation of rising prices. When the prices of goods and services are continuously increasing, it is called inflation. And inflation is a global phenomenon. Everybody is hit by this inflation. But when the asset is taken on lease, the business is protected against inflation. How? At the time of signing the agreement itself, the lease rentals are fixed. The lessee and lessor have agreed that every year so and so amount will be paid by the lessee to the lessor without considering the inflation. So when the value of money is decreasing, purchasing power of money is decreasing, then what will happen? The lessee has to pay the same amount of lease rental. So in this way, the lessee will be protected from inflation if it takes the asset on lease. So in this video, I have explained you about what do you mean by lease, meaning of lease. According to AS 19 of ICAI, the definition of lease I have explained. And then what are the contents of lease agreement or lease deed? And lastly, what are the advantages of leasing I have explained. In the next video, I am going to explain you about the disadvantages of lease and also the different types of lease.